Okay, we'll go ahead and call to order the Finance Committee meeting of Vallecitos Water District on April 13th, 2020, with Director Stanella and Director Martin in attendance. And I'll turn it over to you, Glenn.
All right, so we have two items for discussion. One is a review of the capital budget requests, and the second is just a brief update on the COVID-19 financial impacts. Before we jump into the capital budget requests, I did want to say that I did receive an email from Mr. Mike Hunsaker. He has some questions about how we're conducting the meeting. He provided some oral communications, and I know we're not in oral communication yet. And he also has some comments on item 1. So I did send out the meeting invitation that the board members received, or the committee members received. It doesn't look like he's tried to check into the meeting, nor has he called in. So he may be having technical difficulties, or maybe he didn't see my email. So I guess I would suggest let's go into item 1, and then Director Stanella, whenever you'd like, I can read Mr. Hunsaker's comments on item 1. And then when we get to public comment, I'll read his public comments as well. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, let's go ahead and kick off item 1, and that'll give Mike Hunsaker more time if he's able to join us. If not, at the end of the presentation, then we can hear his comments.
Okay, and I'm monitoring my emails to see if he responded to my the email invitation I sent to him. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Wes. He's going to run you through the capital requests. But before I turn it over to him, I just want to stress that this is all very preliminary. We've just gotten all the requests in from the engineering group and some from O&M, and we haven't really had a chance to sift through them. But as you remember, the purpose of these Finance Committee meetings are to let the Finance Committee meeting members know as soon as we do what's being thrown into the budget, knowing that things will change between now and the proposal at budget adoption time. So with that, I'll turn it over to Wes to run through the capital items. Wes?
Hello. And so is Ed not attending tonight?
Ed is here.
Oh, he is? Okay. I can't see him.
I just had my mic muted.
Oh, yeah. I can see everybody else, but I can't see him. Okay. So this is the Finance Committee meeting April 13th. And as General Manager Pruitt mentioned, we're going to be going through the capital items. So the agenda for tonight is we will do a little budget background progress as usual. Then we'll talk about the capital budget requests. And again, these are preliminary. We've just received the department requests and put them into the budget. After this, we'll be looking at which ones to include or exclude, and part of that will be the discussion from this meeting. Then after that, we'll talk about the next steps in the budget process. And finally, we'll give a brief COVID-19 update. So we sent out, well, let me go through the calendar first. So in February, we updated the budget numbers and the department submitted their budget requests. In March, we actually entered those into the operating budget, and we started to put together the payroll estimates. And then we had the meeting on March 2nd for the budget calendar and the budget versus actual for the last 5 years. And then we had the last meeting on March 23rd to go over the operating budget requests, and that was the preliminary budget requests, and as well as the payroll estimates and staffing. And we've gone through those and started moving those around and including them. And tonight we're having the meeting on the capital budget requests. And I sent out 5 documents. And those 5 documents should have been the draft CIP master, which is sort of an index of all the capital budget items, the draft capital improvement program. I also sent out the draft future projects pages, or the summary page first, which summarizes the pages, and then the pages for the detail. And then I sent out the draft vehicles and equipment page. I'll be referring to those tonight, so hopefully we have all those documents. And we're gonna start with the draft CIP master page. So this is that page, the draft CIP master. It's a big document with a lot of numbers. So I've broken it out into 4 sections. So this is the top left section of that document. And this actually talks about the carryover projects. So these are the projects that were budgeted for in previous years and have not been completed yet. So they're carried over to this year. So we can see previous budget amounts were 55. Is there a question? Okay, so the previous budget amounts included in the previous budget were $55.6 million. The estimated amount spent to date on those projects is 8.9 million and 9 million. And the carry forward is 46.6. So now the next thing we're going to focus on are the new requests. So these are the requests for this fiscal year, the increased carry forward amounts. It's $5.6 million. And of that 5.6, the detail is shown here. And the biggest request is the increase in the Montiel lift station and force main replacement of $2.8 million. As I go through these, I'm going to have James explain them at the end, but I'll just go through the biggest increases first, and then I'll have him talk about what those increases are. The next one is the Tres Amigos water line, increased by $975,000. The San Marcos Interceptor Phase 2 is $960,000 in requests. And finally, the City of San Marcos Creek District Phase 1. That's a $410,000 increase or request for an increase. James, I don't know if you want to give more detail on that, if there are questions about it, or if.
Sure. Since it's fresh on my mind, I'll just go over those. So the Montiel, basically, the board may remember, there's actually several projects. We're looking at trying to get rid of Montiel Lift Station, and we did a study to try and get into Escondido. At the end of the day, Escondido wasn't interested, and it really didn't work because their system would have to be upgraded significantly. So we went back to the drawing board to replace Montiel Lift Station and the force main. So even though this is actually a request, it actually takes a couple of the other projects off the books. Overall, it's an increase in budget, but we actually offset that by almost $1.8 million in offsets compared to the other sewer lines. However, with the new estimate of increasing basically a new lift station at Montiel, and then the pipeline coming out at lift station all the way across Nordahl, so up Montiel, across Nordahl, into the shopping center, that's basically the majority of the cost. So all we did was update the numbers based on the current project, and that's for Montiel. Tres Amigos pipeline, that is a pipeline that has had a lot of breaks. There's in the very north end of our district, basically up in Vista all the way into Gopher Canyon. It's an old pipeline that was inherited by the district. It was a farmer's pipe. It's not even water pipe, to be honest. It's actually a steam pipe. It carries water, obviously. It's fine for carrying water, but it's really thin, and it's got a tar wrapping on the outside, and you can't even weld on it. So at this point, we went ahead and figured out the limits of that pipe. The different numbers showed whether it was 4,000, 5,000 feet. It ended up being close to 10,000 feet. We went ahead and got our ops crew to find the limits of where the bad pipe stops and the good pipe, which is actually steel pipe, starts. And we had about 10,000 feet. And that basically is the reason for that increase. San Marcos Interceptor is basically, we're done with the design. We're out the bid. We had got the latest engineer's estimate. I'm actually kind of hopeful that it's a good bid environment and it'll come underneath the engineer's estimate. But at this point, we're using the new estimate from the engineer on the 100% design. The old number that was in the budget that got carried forward was from an estimate from basically 60% design. So now that we have all the city comments, we know we're working in San Marcos Boulevard. We know it's night work. We know we have to tunnel underneath Pacific Street, and what that looks like, we have a more refined estimate. And the last project, the City of San Marcos, basically the Creek project, that's the bridges. So as you probably are aware, we're responsible for relocation of the line on Discovery Street, the water line, and also the relocation of the line into the new bridges associated with the bridge project with the Creek District. So the estimate that was there before was based on the engineer's estimate from the city, and now they actually open bids. So now our new estimate is based on the bid opening. We're actually still going back and forth about what the district is responsible for compared to what the city's responsible for. So the number will change a little bit, but we're now within probably about $100,000 of where that number will end up. But now that's going to be a concrete number by the time we get it this fiscal year instead of just an estimate. It's based on the actual bid results from the city contractor.
Hey, James, when we're doing the Creek District project, or really any of the projects that you just discussed, will there be any loss of water for a period of time for either residential or businesses around those areas?
So the Montiel is just going to be a sewer project, so no. And the San Marcos Interceptor's a sewer project only, so that's no. But the city project, there will be, but the city project, that construction for us, if you kind of look on that same sheet on page 35, we're not actually expending that money next fiscal year. It'll be the year after. The request is higher for the full budget, but we're not spending it next fiscal year. So we're about a year to a year and a half away from actually building those facilities. And then the Tres Amigos line, that's a similar story. We're just going to be designing that line. We're going to be probably putting in parallel, and then we'll have a shutdown. So people will be out of water, but we're probably a good year away from doing that. But it'll be like an 8-hour shutdown, and it'll be coordinated.
Okay.
Okay, and I can,
If I can interrupt real quickly, Director Sinella, if you get the sense that Director Martin has a comment or a question, please let us know.
Yeah, I think he does.
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead.
Can't hear him at all.
Keep going.
Well, okay, why is our responsibility that high? Are our pipes broken or are we moving it because the city's building a road?
So he wants to know why the cost for the Creek District project is so high, and why we're responsible for it, because he wants to know, is it because our pipes need to be replaced anyways, or are we just having to do it because the city's project?
So it's a city CIP project, and with our agreement with the city on their CIP projects, we're responsible for the cost of relocating it. So instead of us doing it ourselves, we basically join, so this way we don't dig up the road twice, or in this case, fumble over each other, try and get the, with the coordination between the two contractors. We basically use our existing agreement with the city. That was, I think, a 2009 agreement. So in this case, with the infrastructure that's going across the creek right now, it's just going to get decimated, and it'll basically need to be full replacement. And with that full replacement, we're responsible for the payment of that. The bid results are what we go off of. So we get an engineer's estimate, and then at the end of the day, it's the final bid results that count.
Are you good, Hal?
Yeah.
Okay, he's good. Thank you, James.
okay, I should have mentioned at the beginning, that's when I brought up the CIP master, it is an index of the projects. And as you can see on the left-hand side, there's a page number for each one. And that page number refers to the page of the printout. So essentially, full capital program. I'm getting a lot of feedback. So you had the full capital improvement program. And if you want to see any of these projects as we discuss them, you can go to this page number and it'll detail that project. So moving on with the top of the CIP master, this is the top right section, which gives the 5-year spending plan for each of those projects. And as we can see here, I want to focus on this year's spending plan. So fiscal year 2021, we are budgeted or requesting to spend $17.1 million. And the major projects of that are the San Marcos Interceptor, which is 6.8 million. The Montiel Lift Station, which we just discussed, at 1.5 million. And actually, you can see we're spending 3.5 in 21-22 and only 1.5 in 2021. And then the biological selector at MRF for $1.5 million in 2021. Those are the major projects. I don't know if you want more information about those, if you have any questions.
Yeah, I got a question.
Yeah, Hal does. Go ahead.
I have two questions. The first question is on number 69, building the laminate floor replacement. It shows $110,000, but then it shows we're not putting any money to it for 10 years. Why is it even on this list? The second one is.
Okay, hold on. Let me ask the first question first.
Okay.
So on project 69, the floor replacement, he says that his question is that it says that we have $110,000 in 2020 and 21, but he says that we're not doing anything with it for like 10 years. And why is it on here at all?
So that I don't know why it was said that we're not doing it for 10 years. We're actually going to be doing it in this year.
Hey, Hal, why do you think it's not going to be done for 10 years?
Okay. So,
Okay. So he misread it. He apologizes, but now he wants to know which restroom this is and how large of a space is it that warrants $110,000 in spend.
So it's all of the laminate flooring in building B.
So it's all of the what kind of flooring?
All of the, basically everything that's not carpet in building B is going to be replaced.
So it's all of the non-carpeted flooring space in building B, Hal. You know the square feet off the top of your head? Wes?
So Ed might know this better than me, but I think there's also like a sealing process involved and some other underlayment that they have to do because of the way the building was built, and there's a lot of moisture, and that's why it's so expensive, I believe. And again, there's more detail on page 69 of the budget pages, but I think Ed knows more about it than me if he's still here.
Yeah, I'm here, and you're correct. The biggest problem is that we're having moisture coming up through the concrete. The concrete has been sealed in the past to prevent problems with the flooring, but it has not held. So all of the linoleum flooring has to be pulled up in each office and redone. The concrete has to be resealed, and then new linoleum put down. So we have quite a bit that's basically been destroyed over the years, and it's a project that's kind of been pending for the last 4 or 5 years, and hopefully we'll get to it.
Did you hear that, Hal?
yeah, I did. Thank you. And item 70, I know we're no golden bathroom, but what engineering requirements do you have to spend $57,000 on?
Okay, so he's good with the last one. Now his next question is on project number 70. He wants to know what is the ADA project that's required that costs $67,000.
So we went into looking. We went to look at the restrooms to get them updated because they're old. And when we got quotes for them, we were told that certain locations aren't ADA compliant. The two areas are the lobby and the engineering restrooms. I guess both of those are not ADA compliant, so we need to update those and make them ADA compliant.
Did you hear that, Hal?
Yeah, I see. Which
Well, one
restroom?
of them is in the lobby. And what was the second one, Wes?
The engineering restrooms.
And the engineering department restrooms.
We have too many restrooms.
Uh-huh. All right, he just wants to get rid of the restrooms. It's cheaper.
We'll just close them off, seal them up. Be cheaper. Okay, any other questions?
No, good.
Okay, so moving on to the bottom half of the CIP master. This is the section that shows the new projects. Can you see my mouse on the screen, by the way?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so up here you can see it says new projects. So these are the new ones for this year that have new requests. There's everything that was submitted this year that was not in last year's budget. And just to highlight, you can see that Encina, see if I got a, so the total is $93 million, 93.1. Of that, 29.9 is Encina, and 33 million is for future projects. Future projects are projects that will not be worked on in fiscal year 2021. They're in outer years, but we do plan on them because they're part of our 5-year or our 10-year capital plan. So those two together are somewhere around $62 million. I have notes here too. So that being said, of the 93 million, it's about 60, actually I have 60, that's not right, $62 million is for those two. So the remaining, we have 27 projects that are $30.3 million. As I compare to the previous years, well, last year we had 27 projects that were $12.4 million. And the year before we had, I think it was 12 projects at 2.4 million. But of this, since you can see my cursor, our 27 projects this year, one of them is $25.4 million of that $30 million. And then just to go further with that, the total budget, this is the budget for actually 10 years. So this is our 10-year capital outlay budget. It's $145 million, 145.4. Last year in fiscal year 2020, our 10-year plan was $140.2 million. That's an increase of about $5.2 million. And that, let me see if I can find my notes on that. So that mostly that $5 million increase is basically Encina. And then we have the MRF Headworks. So Encina is here, this 29.9, it was 25.4 last year, something like that. Then we have the Headworks at 440,000. And there's a 16-inch bypass, which was budgeted for last year, but it was in the future projects. And we've increased that budget from 1.7 to $2.0 million, so $300,000 increase there. That's pretty much what makes up that $5 million increase over our 10-year capital plan. Any questions on that before I move on?
So on the big one, the parallel outfall, is this the project that James has been talking about for at least a few years since I've been on the board? And will this eventually solve some of the issues that we had during the heavy rain events?
Yeah, Director Snow. So there's actually 4 total outfall projects. This is probably one of the biggest pieces. This is the part that starts at the Laurels and takes what we call our siphon A. So that's kind of the bottleneck. There's also a bottleneck further downstream. So if you look at the existing carryover projects, there's an outfall project there, and then the siphon project is here also. So we need to start working on this portion of it to get rid of the immediate bottlenecks during those peak wet weather events. So this is one of them. It's not the whole thing. The whole thing is like 8 miles. So this is not 8 miles. This is going to be several thousand feet, but definitely not 8 miles.
Will this start to provide those some immediate relief once this section A is done?
Yeah, this would take care of the issue that we have at the Laurels and all the way down to the bottom of the siphon. So, and this would give operations a lot more flexibility and also be able to carry a lot more of that peak flow through that area. So it would solve that problem.
Okay, and what sort of and I don't even know what this all involves, but what are we talking about from a construction standpoint? Any potential impacts to the neighborhood? I live in the Laurel, so I'm sure I'll get questions, and we can probably talk more about it when we get closer to starting. But what are just kind of high level, 30 seconds? What is this all going to involve?
So I got a really good picture of that because in 2005 I put in the pipe that's there now, and there's an old line right next to it. So we're going to look at using the old line that was abandoned right next to it, and the reason it was abandoned because it broke, and we're going to look at trying to repurpose it by putting a structural slip liner in that section. If we're successful at that, which we don't know yet, but if we can be successful at that, then we'd have big pits between the manhole locations, basically, or basically future manhole locations, and we would slip line from basically the Laurels all the way down to Melrose. Okay, so that then you'd have 2 pipes. You'd have the big 24-inch, which we have there now, and you would have a slip line 24-inch, so call it a 22-inch pipe next to it. Then from Melrose going up Poinsettia, it'd be a brand new pipe construction. But it would still be disturbance to the neighborhood if we don't have to dig up all that trail system and just put big pits every 400 to 500 feet. Obviously, that's the way we want to do it if we can.
Okay, and then what's the rough time frame that you have for starting that project? Do you have a month?
Yeah, I wish. It's a complicated project, and next year, basically, we have to get all the agreements and start the environmental process. It's going to be an environmental impact report. The environmental process is going to probably take a year on that project just alone. The last environment, because when you're going through that canyon, there's also habitat. I'm hoping to reduce that environmental process by doing those pits instead of the new pipe the whole way. And then based on that, we'll adjust the budget. But right now, we have construction of that project going all the way out to 2024, 2025 before we're done with the whole thing. But that's the whole thing all the way to El Camino Real. The portion that we're going to concentrate on is that portion from the Laurels to Melrose. We're hoping to get that done sooner within the next 2 to 3 years, hopefully 2 years.
Okay. And so I know it's a long ways off still, but we can talk more as we get closer. But I think we should have a, some communication out to the neighborhoods, Rancho Dorado and the Laurels and over where Glenn lives, and maybe even host like a community, meeting about it for those who might be interested in learning about some of the impacts when we get to it.
Yeah, definitely. Public outreach is something we need to do there anyway, and it'll be required through the environmental process. So we'll be satisfying that, and it's something we should be doing.
Okay. Any questions, Hal?
No, thank you.
No, Hal's good.
Thank you.
Okay. So this next slide is the bottom right section of the CIP master, and this shows the 5-year spending plan for the new projects. And I really wanted to highlight 2 areas. You can see the total at the bottom here of our 5-year spending, which is like 6.7, 9.6, 10.7, 24.6, and 39.7. And of those numbers, if you look at Encina, most years Encina is about 50% of our total spending plan, with the exception of, say, 23, 24, and 24, 25, which is when we actually spend a lot of money on the outfall. So it's really kind of what I wanted to highlight in this slide. And I don't think I have any other discussions on this one unless you have any questions.
Nope.
Mike?
Oh, hold on. Yep, go ahead, Hal.
Maybe you can have Wes just explain what percentage that is in Encina of their overall budget.
Are you talking about Encina's overall budget or ours?
Encina's overall budget is CIP.
So I don't know if you heard that, Wes, but he's interested to know what that dollar amount that you have for Encina, what percentage of that is that of the overall Encina budget?
So we own about 22.4% of their capital. So that's the percentage that usually gets applied. So if you look at their 5-year plan, we usually take about 22 to 24% of that, and we budget for that because we'll be billed for it.
Yeah, I'll clarify that a little. So in general, what Wes says is correct, but they have a lot of remote facilities of which we have 0 involvement. For example, the Carlsbad Water Recycling Facility or the Vista Carlsbad Lift Station. So when they look at their full capital, we don't get 22.4% of that. We get 22.4% of the projects that we have joint ownership at the Encina Water Pollution Control Facility itself, not the remote facilities.
He says thank you.
Okay, so that's the CIP master. Next, I'm just going to walk you through an example page. So this is one of the CIP pages that go behind the master, which it refers to. So this, for example, is page 45. This is page 45 of the capital improvement program that I sent out, just to use an example and kind of walk you through the sections. So each project, we have a title for it, obviously, first, and then there's a description of the project itself, which is just a brief description. Then we have who's responsible, the project manager, the project number assigned to that project, which department is in charge of it, the funding source, which in this case is sewer replacement. And we've got the comments, which gives a detailed description of the project and why it's needed and why we're, and what'll be done. And then you have the project spending plan. This is the spending plan over the 5 years by planning, design, and construction, and when we're doing each one of those. And actually goes out to 24, 25 and thereafter. So it could be a 10-year potential spending plan. And then finally, you've got the project timeline at the bottom, which shows when it's approved, when the planning begins, design begins, and when it's completed overall. So that's a project page, just to kind of familiarize you with that. Do you have any questions on the pages?
Yes,
Yep, Hal does.
is this being paid for by our recycling partners?
So he's asking about this specific project that you have as an example, and he wants to know if this is being funded by our recycling partners.
Yes, I'll take that question. So this project, as you may recall, I brought this to the board when we awarded it for design. The aeration basin, which is a secondary treatment process, is being paid for Vallecitos by our ratepayers. The biological selector component of it is being paid for by our recycled water customers, which is Olivenheim and Carlsbad. And we actually got agreement from Carlsbad already that they will pay for it. So everything that has to do with the recycled portion is being paid for by others.
He says, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, I'll move on to the vehicles and equipment budget. So here's the vehicles and equipment request page, and this is page 103 of the handout. And this shows basically mostly replacement vehicles that are being requested for this fiscal year. The top portion are vehicles. So you can see the vehicle number being replaced, the requested description, the project number assigned to it, and then the amount of the funding source and the total cost over here on the right-hand side. So the total vehicles being requested for fiscal year 2021 is $1.2 million, 1.184. And the total equipment being requested is 60,000, which makes a total of $1.244 million for this fiscal year. Of that 1.2 million, 502,000 is for the Vactor. That's the majority of it. And I don't know if you have any questions or if Ed wants to go into description or explanation of these vehicle requests.
I just had a question, and more so for Glenn with your city background. How does the cost of a Vactor truck compare to like a fire truck?
The big fire trucks tend to be like $750,000.
Okay, wow.
So the Vector's not quite that high.
Wow, okay, thanks. That was just curious.
I have a question.
Oh, Hal's got one. Go ahead.
Out of curiosity, we're replacing two 4x4 super cabs. What are we replacing? What are we getting rid of? What equipment are they replacing? What age are they? How many miles are on them? And is a 4x4 super cab necessary for that job?
Okay, so he's got a question about the two Ford, what were they, yeah, those top two super cabs. He wants to know if they're the 4x4s, if they're the ones that are being replaced, what's the mileage, what's the condition, and then he wants to know or verify if the role for these vehicles still requires them to be 4x4s. And what's the age of the vehicles that are being replaced?
Yeah, Ed can address that, or James.
Yeah, I can answer the first part. So both of those vehicles are for actually the engineering inspection department. And I'm looking at notes here from the mechanics, and that's how we determine on most of these vehicles when they're due for replacement. So vehicle number 199 is at 100,000 miles. There are several comments of mileage and runtime. Let's see, worn overall condition, failure prone, reliability issues, and then repair costs and downtime for that vehicle. What was the other one? 209. 124,000 miles on that vehicle, and same issues. So they've been used quite a bit. And then James can probably answer the reasons why we need four-wheel drive vehicles.
Yeah, so our inspectors go into unimproved areas quite often. If you look at what was going on in Rancho Tesoro when it was being built, they were driving on those unimproved areas, those dirt lots. And sometimes it's a little muddy conditions. They do use the 4x4, not every day, but weekly, which is fairly often for a 4x4. The other thing that there's actually an offset here, we actually had an F-250 in our fleet for inspectors. Inspectors do not need an F-250. Operations wanted to get a new F-250, which is more expensive. So what inspection did is we gave our fairly new F-250 to operations and ordered a new F-150. So this way it actually ended up saving a little bit of money, that whatever the difference between a F-150 and 250 is. But as far as right sizing the fleet, there's no reason for inspectors to have F-250s. We're not hauling or towing anything.
And that also saves us in operations from having to buy a new F-250 by repurposing the one from James's fleet.
Well, and just to throw it in there too, vehicle 199 is it's 14 years old. And I don't know if I'd mentioned, but 209 is 11 years old, and they're both fully depreciated in addition to the mileage that they have.
Yep.
Are you good, Hal?
It's a meter reader's truck.
Yeah, what's your question? You just want to know, you want to know more about it?
Or maybe an XL Super Duty.
So,
XL Super Duty for a meter reader?
okay, so he wants to know about vehicle 232, and he wants to know why the meter reader needs a F-250 Super Duty.
Okay, that vehicle 232 also has 100,000 miles on it. Similar comments from the mechanics that it's in bad shape. It's due for replacement. As far as the Super Duty, that would be meters falls under Wes, but I think it's because they need the extra room for all of the equipment they do have in there for meter reading. But Wes, I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, and I'll have to look into it. I know they've got the existing one is a Ford F-150, and it's 10 years old. But I'll have to ask them if they do need Super Duty. Again, these are the requests, so we'll go back to them and see, do they need a Super Duty? And if they don't, then, we'll look into it.
Yeah, the existing vehicle is an XL, so it does have an extra extended cab, I think, on it. But yeah, that'll be a question for Gina.
Yeah.
Okay, can you let us know what you guys find out at a future meeting?
Yeah, we will.
Yes.
Hey, Ed, can you briefly talk about the combination truck and what we did last year with the rotor?
Yes. So last year we discussed possibly getting a combination truck because we have two that are constantly breaking down on us. Last year we saved about $200,000 by purchasing a router truck, jet router truck. So it doesn't have the vacuum part of it. It actually holds a little extra water, so there's less downtime refilling. A lot of the streets now that the city of San Marcos is building has the roundabouts, which the large combination vehicles have a hard time getting through. This is a little smaller truck, can get into the tighter areas. So last year we did save a little over $200,000 by choosing to replace one of the three combination trucks with the rotor vehicle. And just to give you kind of an idea how long it takes to get these things, because they're special order, we ordered it back in July as soon as we could, and we still don't have it.
Wow,
Quick question.
okay.
Why do the combination trucks continually break down? Are they old or are they poorly built?
They're old. We've used them as much as we possibly can. They get a lot of run hours. If you looked at the miles, you wouldn't think that much because they only travel from manhole to manhole. It's the hours that are on the engine and on the fan and on the pump. All of the hours they spend every day operating day in, day out. They take a beating and they only last so long. And the combination trucks, the one that we're replacing in last year's budget with the rotor truck and then the request this year, they're spending a lot of downtime, whether in our shop or a lot of times we have to send them to a company called Haker that builds them for specialized equipment repair. So it gets very expensive. Plus we lose a lot of our ability to keep the sewer lines clean because we're down a vehicle.
He said thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, so that's all I have for the vehicles and equipment. Moving on. The next steps in the budget process. So now we will incorporate the capital budget into the budget, which we've actually done. We'll start looking at it and seeing which we want to include or exclude and go through that, see if we can push projects out or keep them where they are. And doing that, I'll be working with engineering and Ed on as I do the long range planning or the reserve projections, we'll be talking about those capital projects. So that's part of the revising and refining of it. And then the plan is to meet again on April 27th, 2020, if your calendar permits. And in that meeting, we tentatively have a cost of service study update. And then we'd like to talk about any board request items, any items you guys like us to look at. Hopefully at that meeting, I'll have some sort of draft budget to present to you so that we can get an idea of if there are any items you'd like to discuss. And then in May, we'll put together the first draft and we'll bring that to either finance committee or board meeting on May 4th. That'll be the draft proposed budget. We'll do the same thing. We'll go through any board requested items or changes or revisions. And then May 20th, we'll do the full board workshop for the hopefully final review of the proposed. And then June 4th or June 3rd will be the approved, hopefully approve the recommended budget. And that's the calendar. And that's it for the budget. Do you have any questions about that before we move on to the COVID-19 update?
And before we move on to COVID, remember that Mr. Hunsaker did have some comments he submitted on item 1.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and read those to us, Glenn?
Okay, so I'm just reading exactly what he wrote. It says, item 1, capital improvement requests. Item 1, I wish to receive a soft copy of the capital improvement requests. I'm not sure what he means by a soft copy. I'll reach out to Mr. Hunsaker and we can either send him an email that has the digital copy, or we can make a paper copy available to him. The second comment, and it was the last comment, it says, why are not capital impact fees not completely covering the needs? I think what he's asking is, why are we using ratepayer funds instead of capacity funds? And that's because the capacity fee funds only pay for capacity increasing projects. So there's a lot of projects we have that are replacement projects. Those are paid for with ratepayer funds, and the capital facility fee funds are paid for enhanced capacity due to new growth. So James, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, and that's exactly it. And also, you also have to remember that that we collect over time. So the spending will go up and down, but we collect over time. So whether we go out for debt service, all those assumptions are in there in the cap fees. So you're not going to see a exact number of cap fees coming in to the amount of dollars being spent equal every year. You'll see that some years we'll collect more, some years we'll collect a lot less, but over time we get our money back.
Well, and it's worth mentioning that we actually did not discuss cap fees in this meeting. This was just capital projects expenditures.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
That was all Mr. Hunsaker had on item 1.
Okay, so moving on to COVID-19 update. This is just a brief update. I just wanted to talk about some things as we go through this. This is just from my perspective, the monetary items. We are tracking all costs related to the COVID the district is incurring, and we're going to submit everything that we have, everything we're tracking for reimbursement. And some of the things we're tracking are the direct labor materials costs. To date, it's only been 2 pay periods. It's been approximately $25,000 in direct labor materials costs. We are tracking and trying to accumulate all the late fees that we're waiving or any lock charges that we're not incurring or collecting. And we don't have a number for that yet. It's a little bit early, but just to give you an idea, the late lock charges for a year. So if we were to go a full year without collecting any late fees or lock charges, that'd be about $290,000. We're only a month or so into it, or a month and a half into it, so it's hard to say, but just to give you an idea, if we went a full year, that would be the impact approximately. Another thing worth mentioning is like bad debt expense. So if we have customers that aren't paying, we want to keep track of any increases in uncollectible accounts. And to give you just an idea what that might cost us, say we went a full year, our uncollectible accounts are typically about $40,000 to $50,000. So even if that were to double, or let's say it doubled, it'd be about $50,000 cost to us. That's just to give you an idea what it might be if it were a full year in this environment. But we are keeping track of it, and anything that we track, we will be submitting for reimbursement and just hoping to get reimbursement for everything, but we'll see. Oh, another thing worth mentioning is that we are trying to figure out, it's a little bit more difficult, but we will be looking into see if we can figure out what we're possibly losing in water sales. It's really early for that, and it's tough to tell now, obviously, with all the rain. But if we figure out a way to track that, we'll keep you apprised of that as well.
And I just wanted to add a little bit about some of the Finance Committee members may have heard that some cities are really struggling financially or will be struggling financially because of this. And just want to have a little brief conversation about that and explain the difference between city revenues and district revenues. So obviously we rely heavily on rates to fund our operations. I think we, for water and wastewater combined, only about 5.5 million come from sources other than rates and charges. And that's about 5% of our total revenue. So the rates are 95% of what we do. So the primary source of other revenue, so that 5.5 million, 2.3 million of it is property tax, which I think is pretty secure. There will obviously be some impacts to property tax collection. Some customers may lose their home as a result of the economic impacts from the coronavirus, and that will ultimately affect property tax to some extent. We don't know how much. The redevelopment funds, we get about 1.6 million per year. I don't think that's going to be affected at all by it. And our investment returns, normally I think about 1.6 million for that as well. And those could be hurt a little bit because of the impacts on the stock market. So that's kind of from the district perspective. I think our revenue is going to be fairly secure. Clearly, there will be people that will be struggling to pay their water bill, so those revenues may go down a little bit, but I don't think it'll be that substantial. If you look at a city, though, it's a very different perspective. Cities rely extensively on sales tax. They have a lot of property tax, special assessments, transient occupancy tax, or TOT, which is the hotel tax. They have licenses and permits. They charge for special services, and they may have some rental income. So some of those are highly volatile, and probably the biggest one from a city's perspective that does not affect us is the sales tax revenue. If you look at the city of San Marcos, I looked at their budget for the current fiscal year, their sales tax revenue estimates are $18 million, and that's about 21% of their budget. So if you just took a guess and said, if the city was to lose 25% of their sales tax this year, that'd be about a $4.5 million hit. That'd be a pretty big hit. For the city on property tax, they get about 24 million in property tax, and that's about 29% of their budget. That's probably pretty secure. Their TOT is only about 1.4 million. That's about 2%, and that's going to be really diminished. I mean, fortunately, I guess for San Marcos, they don't rely on TOT a lot, but a city like Carlsbad will get hit really hard with the TOT downturn as due to coronavirus. So if you look at the other things, I guess what I wanted to bring up is that the cities are much more vulnerable to the economic impacts of the COVID-19 than a district is. We're in much better shape. We're going to be tracking it, like Wes said. We're going to be looking at not just our expenses, but also our revenue hits as a result of this. And as the budget adoption comes around, we'll probably have a better outlook as to what impacts COVID is having on district expenses. But for now, I just want to have a general conversation, make sure the Finance Committee members know that we're aware of the issues and we're tracking them. And as Wes mentioned, we'll be submitting for reimbursement for as many of our expenses as we can. So with that, I'll turn it over to the Finance Committee members and see if you have any questions about that.
Yeah, no, well, first off, thanks for the update. It was helpful. You know, I certainly don't want to violate any privacy laws, but to the extent that you're able to share, how's our team doing? How's the entire staff doing? Has anybody fallen ill by chance?
No, we don't have anybody that, as far as I'm aware of, no employees are directly impacted. There are people that have gone home because of concerns, but none of that has been tested to verify whether they have it or not. I don't even think there's any immediate family members of employees that have it. There's, distant relatives and friends that obviously are impacting virtually all of us. But we've been pretty lucky so far that most of our folks seem really healthy. But thanks for asking.
Good. Any questions, Hal?
Yeah, Mike, can you hear me?
Can you hear him at all?
It's very difficult. Not at all, no.
Not really, Hal, but what's your question?
Okay, it's fairly complicated, but I think you'll proper couching that it needs. I think they're doing a fantastic job. I appreciate all of it. However, we do have people that are working 50% of the time. We do have people that are working from home. Are we able to recap any of that money through the SBA? For the people that aren't working, for instance, we're getting, I'm not, boy, I gotta be careful how I say this. The construction crews are working half on, half off, half on, half off, which is smart. So they're not getting anyone sick. But for that half time they're off, is there money that we can get from any of the COVID bundles that are out there for small businesses?
All right. Here's a long one. So I'll couch it. Essentially, first off, he said, you guys are doing an outstanding job. Keep up the great work. But he wants to know through these, perhaps through these reimbursements for the, from the feds or whoever that we might pursue for this COVID situation, is there going to be any opportunities to recoup, say that, I'm trying to think of the best way to say it, but as far as like with people working from home or people not working at all but still getting paid, is there a way to recoup some of that? It's not lost salary, but unproductive salary, or is there any chance that we might get some of that money back?
Yeah, so there's a chance, and I couldn't put a number on the chance, but the one thing you do know is if you don't track it and submit it, you won't get it. So we're tracking all those costs, and when the time is right, we'll be submitting those costs as much as we can. And I assume the states and the feds will make kind of categorical determinations. For example, they may say, hey, if it didn't increase your overall costs, it's not reimbursable. So for example, if we have people at home that are getting paid, the feds or the state will say, hey, they're going to get paid anyway, whether they're working or not. So you haven't been damaged directly. I've seen cases where the state and the feds have said just that we're only going to pay for costs over and above what you would have normally paid. So if you had to go buy supplies, face masks, those types of things, hand sanitizers, those costs that you normally wouldn't have incurred, those costs may be eligible. Labor, it depends on the type of incident and how many people are claiming. You can imagine how many, the magnitude of the claims that the state and the feds are going to get, and they'll have to factor that in when they make a determination over what's reimbursable or not. So I wish I could say with certainty whether we would or wouldn't. All I can say is that we're tracking the costs to increase the likelihood of getting reimbursed. Hopefully that helps.
Did that answer it, Hal?
Thank you.
Yeah, he said thank you.
All right, I think that's all we had. We will definitely work on the technology aspect to make sure that Director Martin in the future can be heard better, whether it's through verifying the phone number works or providing him with a laptop, but we'll make sure the technology keeps improving.
Okay. Anything else, Hal? Okay. If nobody else has anything, we'll go ahead and adjourn.
All right, I'm going to stop the recording then.
Ann? Wait, is Ann trying to get our attention?
Yeah. Go ahead, Ann.
I think Mr. Hunsaker had a comment under the public comment.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, would you like me to read Mr. Hunsaker's comments?
Yes, please.
Okay. So he has 4 comments. First, he says the link on the committee meeting does not work. He's right. So we had set up the link for the Wednesday meeting. I did send out a special invitation to Mr. Hunsaker. I don't know if he got it or not, but he didn't join us, so I'm assuming he didn't. His second comment, why not hold the committee meetings in the boardroom where you have Zoom capabilities? Well, the building is closed to the public. We have Zoom capabilities remotely as we're doing right now. Number 3, Since when is appropriate to shut out the public, even if I am the only likely participant? We have gotten legal advice that it's okay to conduct the meetings the way that we're conducting them during the period of time that the federal and state governments have made these declarations. And his last comment is this a violation of the Brown Act? Should not the meeting be rescheduled? And see my previous comment, the attorneys have advised us that we're okay to continue to do business in this fashion while the declarations have been made. So that was his 4 comments.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you, Ann.
Okay,
So
if there's nothing else, then we'll go ahead and adjourn and call it a night.